and there's the record. All right. So stable internet. I think we've got stable internet now. I think we can go for it. All right, cool. All right, and I'll kick it off. And welcome to the Pagey Train. Today we have on the show Cat Soul, podcaster from the Kill the Cat podcast series, writer, producer, director. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before curiosity kills the cat, let's get just straight into it for this lockdown episode of the Pagey Train. You've got a film coming out. It's called Transition. Is that right?
Yeah. So this is my latest short film. It took 2.5 years to make, and it's only 3.5 minutes long. But it's up on YouTube, on Cat Soul YouTube. And it probably won't surprise you to learn that it is about trains after our last episode on the Pagey Train.
The obsession of trains is still coming through. I think after psychoanalyzing both of our outlooks on trains there, I think I've had to reevaluate what I think about the world. So how is it about trains this time? Is it more about, is it directly about trains, or is it just like the journey on the train?
Yeah, so the idea behind this was just me and my DP, Rasmus Kalmer, took an wonderful actress named Alex King, and we went and shot on trains, totally legally.
Yeah, good. Good.
Yeah, 100%. So we just had like 2 days just going around kind of central Sydney on trains. Like I said, we shot this 2.5 years ago, so there was no COVID to worry about. And we just got footage that we thought looked good, and the idea was to take the footage and go and make a story of it later.
Yeah, okay. So now you've sort of got out of that post-production stage. So you went and collected it a couple of years ago, and you've put it together now. So is this something that you've written, or?
Yeah, so me and I worked with a couple of editors on it, both Jamie Murray and then later Ibrahim Faraj, who's my co-host on Kill the Cat.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote some voiceover, Mathilde Anglade. We ended up recording it in French. So we got that recording done and kind of figured out what the story was going to be using the footage we had. Look, I wouldn't do it again. It was a good process to do once, I think. Wouldn't do it again. Why would you do that process?
I think you can go through that with some films. You can go like that, I think. There's some projects that I've done where I go, I'd never do that again. But there's some projects where I've said that and I've gone and done it again. So it's hard to say that I'm not going to do it again basket. I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if you do it again. We'll see. But you got another one. You got another film coming out as well that you've recently directed?
So I produced and co-wrote this one. This one's a lot more fun. Transition is very dark and broody and about the artistic process and all that stuff. Tosses is a Dungeons and Dragons short film where we took the famous business card scene from American Psycho and shot that, but using Dungeons and Dragons dice instead. And it stars Kendall Drury from One for All, which is an amazing web series on YouTube that if you're into D&D, definitely go check it out. If you're into D&D, you've probably already seen it, just in case you haven't. One for All, it's on YouTube.
That, I have to say, sounds like a super nerdy premise, the Dungeons and Dragons. But do you think the Dungeons and Dragons culture have gotten a heavy judgment through society because they're always known as geeks and nerds? Do you think that's a little bit too much?
I think it's really changed. I think it's changed a lot over maybe like the past 5 to 10 years. I think Community did an episode on it. The famous one is a online stream called Critical Role, which kind of brought it to the masses. The creators released 5th edition, which is designed to be more accessible for new players. It's a community of people, and it's really, really interesting. And I'm so glad that I get to be a part of it. I think I've been playing for about 2 years and pretty active in the community for about a year now.
Well, just for our listeners at home that may think they know what Dungeons and Dragons are, but don't really know what Dungeons and Dragons are, what is the game of Dungeons and Dragons?
Sure. So it's a tabletop role-playing game. So you make a character, and there's different classes and different races. So at the moment, I'm playing a tiefling artificer. So a tiefling is kind of like a devil person, and then an artificer kind of like a wizard, but they use mechanics, so it's very like Tony Stark, Iron Man kind of an idea. And you meet with your group. There's a dungeon master the dungeon master serves as like narrator and judge. And we role play, and every time we say we want to do something, we roll the dice, and the dice determines whether we succeed or fail. And I honestly think it's something all storytellers and filmmakers should do, because it's one of the best tools I think you can have in your kit.
Oh, really? What do you mean by that? Is that to do with like the narration of it, or is that the setting of the story? Like, why would that be good for a director?
So I think I'm a player and a dungeon master at this point. So I think as a player, it's been really good for me. Like, I'll say something and I'll want something to happen in the story, but then I'll roll my dice and I'll fail. And then you have to continue and act out. It's great for improv. It's great for story beats. Dungeons and Dragons is essentially collective storytelling. So you're having to listen to 5 or 6 people at the table with you. And even though the dungeon master or the game master is totally in control, well, they think they're in control. We wish we were in control. But the players are really telling the story. And then as a DM, you're essentially like continually telling a story. And I've learned it does not matter how much prep you do for your sessions, you will always end up improving. And the mark of a good DM is learning to go with it, and also trying to disguise the fact that you're probably making up most of the session.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Well, because I've only played D&D a couple of times, and I've never really looked at it that way. You've really opened my horizons to looking at it that way, looking at it as a way to storyboard, I think, and to improvise and think on your feet. I think that's really good advice, actually. So what's the duration of this film? Like, how long? What's the name of this movie, actually?
Tosses.
And how long does Tosses go for?
Like 3.5 minutes, I think. It's pretty short. And it's 2.5 years to make.
Some projects take longer than others, man. I'm still working on projects that are like 5 years old, and they're just getting older. And as am I. But I think 3.5 minutes is really challenging to get into a movie. I generally find most people that I talk to making movies, especially short films, getting under 15 minutes can be challenging. Trying to compress your story into that space. I don't know, maybe perhaps Dungeons and Dragons would be helpful to help you compress your stories, because that's what film is really. It's compressed narration.
Yeah, I mean, Tosses was fairly simple because it was based off that business card scene. So we essentially already had a script to rewrite. Transition, I was very wary going into transition because it's the kind of film I don't like. And I just think I've seen this kind of film done. I've worked with a lot of students and on a lot of student films when I was working for Sydney Film School, and I've seen this filmed on a lot. So I really, really wanted it to be short, because essentially it's a poem film, and I don't want to watch a poem film for 15 minutes. I think the first cut was 7 minutes. And even then I'm like, no, like you get about 3.5.
Yeah, also, you got to keep the interest of your audience, don't you? Like, obviously.
Just short and sweet. And then from a practical standpoint, there's a lot of film festivals out there with under 5-minute categories.
Yeah, definitely.
The 11:59 to Washington Square, that did quite well in festivals because it's 4.5 minutes. And therefore, like, I had a lot of categories I could enter that into where there's less competition. Yeah,
when you're talking about screen time, durations come into play. So it's one of those double-edged swords. Like, I've started to change the way I give advice to people, especially as a festival director. Duration of film, I'd always say to people, 7 minutes is really good. Like, 7 minutes is a good size film. But what I tend to say to people now is like 7 to 14 minutes is good. But it depends on the context. Like, you can sometimes, we've had films that were a minute long that have been entered to Made in the West. Ironically, it was one about a postcard. Not a postcard, sorry, a business card.
Oh, yeah.
So someone made a film about a business card and it only lasted a minute. And it was really showing off the cinematic skills and their skills as a painter. So they used the film called Business Card to show off their skills, which is in fact, their business card. So that's something you can do in like a minute. There certainly is narratives out there, or genres that you can compress down smaller. But if you're going for an act 1, act 2, act 3, when you start getting into those kind of formulas, it's hard to get it under 5. Really is a challenge to get your film down. I've written a sci-fi recently that I'm trying to shoot. If we can stop having a lockdown, I can go and shoot my goddamn movie. Not frustrated, I'm not emotional either. I'm not emotional. I can hold this together. I've got this. No, but I aim to do a 7-minute film, but it's always coming out to 9, 11 minutes. So I'm still working to compress it. It's very, very challenging.
Yeah, and I think that's like the number one feedback that I find myself giving, and like people tend to receive on their short films, is make it shorter.
Yeah, totally. You can cut the fat.
It can get very precious. I definitely do. Like when you're the director. Actually, I say that. I think I cut too much out. I think I go the opposite way. But I think the usual thing is when you've written and directed something, you're generally very precious about every moment. And that's kind of where the editor needs to come in and say, you can say this in a shorter way, or this is stronger if you get to these plot beats faster.
Yeah, totally. It's good to hand it off to another editor, but you'll always end up with different work because what you select as shots and what someone else selects can be different as well. I find other things can affect the edit process and how durations happen as well, and shot selection for just in general, just shot selection in general. If you directed it, you were there. You know what takes kind of works from a performance point of view. But if you've got good paperwork, you could reflect that in your paperwork, and your editor could pick that up or not. So yeah, there is arguments to say to edit your own work, but there's also arguments to say not to edit your own work. I think the real middle line is like you say, is not to be precious. You've got to look at it in a very subjective, objective way. Even though there's subjectiveness to it, you've got to be very objective about it. Go, oh, this scene sticks out. It needs to be trimmed. When you look at it subjectively, where you might have a bit of bias involved in that, it makes the decisions harder. But I prefer to get other people to edit my work. That's for sure. I do prefer it, or I prefer to edit other people's work. But yeah, I'm doing what am I doing at the moment? I'm doing a Foley job at the moment, so I'm doing a web series, and I'm doing one edit job. I just finished a voiceover job, which was cool. And this is another one. I'm doing a military what do you call it? A military advisor on a film. So living the dream.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to approach that.
So that's like a first time thing.
Yeah, I've never been an advisor on a film in that regard. No, I've always been a technical advisor, not a I don't know, it's a procedural sort of thing, looking at military procedures and how they do things and making sure that's correct for film. So I think I've already said too much. I can't go too much into that. I've said way too much. I've let the cat out of the bag, man. I've let the cat out of the bag. Speaking of cats again, how is the podcast going? What episode are you up to?
I think we just recorded our 18th episode, which is coming out in August on The Good Place. So we only do it once a month, just because we put a fair amount of research and like work into every episode, and we just found like feasibly once a month is what we can achieve. But no, it's going really, really well. It's got like a really good reception, which has been like we've learned a lot, which was the whole point of doing it in the first place. Like we wanted to learn more about screenwriting and filmmaking. We've been on a couple of other podcasts. We did a really fun collaboration with a podcast called Do You Reckon You Can Meet Leo? And it's 2 Sydney-based actors, Sam Arthur and Lizzie Heath, who want to meet Leonardo DiCaprio. That's the whole podcast. And every episode ways. So we went on them and we analysed and broke down Shutter Island with them.
Yeah, okay.
If anyone wants some like fun, interesting podcasting, do you reckon we can meet Leo? 10 out of 10 recommend.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, I think I caught that one actually. You guys, your viewership your listenership's going up. You guys are growing. It's a good thing to see.
We're growing, and we have a few more podcasts in the works.
Oh yeah.
Don't want to say too much about them just yet, but we do have some more coming out, hopefully under the Kill the Cat Presents label. been a little chaotic with lockdown and COVID and all that. But it's easier to make a podcast in lockdown than a film. So
Yeah, I suppose it is. It
kind of
depends.
inspired.
Yeah, it depends on the style though.
Yeah.
So like I've done like this is a lockdown episode, obviously, because we're doing it on Zoom. I still have a good experience here. I still get to talk to friends, still get to interview interesting people. That's still cool. But the experience of in person is just different. An in studio interview is totally different from an online interview. They're similar in ways, but the experience is very different, I find. Yeah, I find it more on a Zoom one, on an online podcast. I find it very on off. You know, one person talks, one person goes, and it's very like gates. It's like one off, on off. In a studio, it's lots more overlapping, lots more over talking. You get really excited, you get really rambunctious. I think the pace sort of slows down. I tend to do half-hour episodes. Sometimes I go out to an hour. I think I did an episode with Beena. I couldn't bring her in to close the show. But she'll do that to you. Yeah. So are you talking about doing more podcasts under another banners, or are you doing more Kill the Cat?
More podcast. We are going to continue Kill the Cat for as long as that goes on for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we've got. Which ones can I actually talk about? I think I can talk about two.
Okay.
Because they're directly kind of the ones that I'm doing for the show. And then the other ones like belong to other people, so I'm not sure how much they want me to say about them, so I won't.
Okay. You can't let too much out yet.
Yeah. So the one I'm producing at the moment is called Things We Wish We'd Known. This is a lot more experimental. This is when people have been sending me voice memos about advice they would give to a younger self. So we're going to take those, we've divided them up into themes, and we're going to add some music. And yeah, it's just meant to be kind of 20-minute episodes, very like reflective, meditative. Some of them are very funny about, just like little pieces of life advice. So I'm not quite sure when that's coming out. Again, lockdown has kind of thrown off all our schedules. But that's one. And then I am also working on a fiction one. I think I may have mentioned this last episode.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Tangent,
that's right.
Which is, again, very, very slow going. It's kind of one of those projects, those projects, and you are working on them, but they don't have a deadline. So you always get like projects with deadlines. So that project gets shoved to the side.
Yeah, usually the ones without a deadline are your personal babies. Yeah.
So I work on that when I have a chance, but unfortunately deadlines have kind of made that one go on.
Yeah, working for other friends and colleagues and money tends to get in the way of your own projects sometimes.
Oh, definitely.
It does happen. Definitely does happen. I think, I'm working on like 4 or 5 projects at the moment, and 3 of them aren't mine. So yeah, I'm always working on other people's work, but that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Can't complain too much. That's why I'm doing this, I guess. I know that sometimes you wish you could just do your stuff full time, but it just doesn't work.
Definitely.
Man, no, we're terrified at the moment, man. Made in the West, with all this stuff going down. Like, you just touched on lockdown before.
Am I allowed to talk about the protests?
Yeah, of course we can talk about the protests. In fact, we should. Like, I haven't really looked a lot at it. I just saw some snippets on the news. I saw some things online. Saw a couple of memes. I saw a couple of interesting Simpsons memes, which always make me giggle. But images of dudes punching horses and people putting police in headlocks and throwing ink at police. I just think it's ridiculous. It's absolutely appalling.
And just big crowd of people in the CBD. So, yeah, I guess at the time of recording, we don't really know what the ramifications of that are going to be, but it feels like lockdown is probably now going to be extended even more.
Oh, well, I don't know if I don't know if that event alone will extend the lockdown. It potentially could, of course, but the lockdown's already going to go for at least another 8 weeks, I reckon. So to go, if it does increase it by 8 weeks, that's going to be a real heavy blow. But I think if you ever ask yourself a question, how many crazy people are in Sydney? I think the answer is about 3,000.
Yep, that sounds right.
So if I've ever asked that question, you got answered that was answered yesterday at the protests of people going to it was an anti-lockdown movement. I saw excuse me, I saw some signs that were just absolutely weird. And not to have a go at anyone's faith or anything like that, but one of the ones I saw was the blood of Christ is my vaccine. And I don't know how to react to that. Like in one way it's amusing, in another way it's crazy, in another way it's concerning. So I don't know, when you see signs like that and people just willfully having a go at police, like that's what they were doing. They were just throwing stuff at police at a unregistered protest. But I suppose, like at the same time, like I'm not saying that not being an organized protest, like not being an authorized protest, doesn't mean there shouldn't be a protest. In fact, in most circumstances, when something needs to be protested, it's probably best that it isn't unauthorized because it's usually a really big issue. But I don't think that qualifies. I just don't think it does.
Yeah, I don't understand the logic of end the lockdown. So we're going to gather all these people in one place and potentially spread the disease even further, which will extend lockdown. I don't know what that means. Look, obviously, massive ramifications in people's life and health. I can't get back to New Zealand now. I was planning to for family reasons. Smaller scale, we can't make films. Again, not as important as other ramifications, but at least it's a lot harder to make.
Oh, look, I'm really lucky. Like I've got a great employer. I've still got work because a lot of work I do is from home. So a lot of things I build are digital products that that I work for clients on, and that can all be done from my studio. So I'm a fortunate one. There's people that are obviously doing it tough from the lockdown, but if you really want to start pointing fingers, I think if you're going to point fingers, you got to point fingers at the vaccine rollout, the way that the narratives that have been set by the federal government, the disparity between all of the state governments, and turning this into a political game. I think that they're the causes of this fire. That when you're looking at this end of the blaze, it's like it's just chaos. If you really want to look to where the law and order of this was, or where this really stemmed from, it was, we need deal makers in the government that get us the right deal for the right amount of vaccines, the variety of vaccines. We should already be vaccinated. Like I organise my vaccination. I can't get it until October. They're advertising by setting the narrative to young people. They're trying to get, the thing that really bugged me is the federal government's trying to get the governing body that looks after medications and their approval and their usage to change their perspective. But yet, on the other hand, they'll say, but we're always going to follow the medical advice. But the medical advice they received wasn't good enough, so they're asking them to change that advice. Okay, well, again, politicizing this event, man. Politicizing this thing is terrible. So that's the cost of it. If I really want to put on my if I want to put on my tinfoil hat, you could argue that, look to see who owns AstraZeneca and its production in Australia, to why they're pushing that usage rather than usage of other brands or other methodologies. But I think that we've had 2 people died from AstraZeneca. But 5 people have died from the virus. So it's essentially it's a choice. Do we kill this percentage of people or that percentage of people? And I think that's not a choice. That's not a choice we should have to make.
No.
So all based on politics, though. It's all based on politics. If it was based on our health, and if it was based on purely the livelihoods, economically and physiologically, they would have dealt with this differently. So I'm not I don't care what government was in, like whether it's Labor or Liberal. I'm not a Labor or Liberal person. I'm not a Greens person. I'm just I don't know if I'm a government person, to be frank with you. I think the whole thing is flawed. So I'm not saying it's a political party per se, but there's certainly people at the helm at the moment that aren't doing their job. And I think Australians are really aware of that. And I hope they vote accordingly. That's basically what it is for me.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've got family over in New Zealand, and kind of watching New Zealand deal with the situation, I would say a lot better. Yeah. Look, I'm glad I stayed in Sydney, even though the situation has not been as good. I think the opportunities for me have been better. But if I had, say, been stranded in New Zealand.
Yeah. Well, I've got one thing to say about New Zealand, though. Is it possible for us to get Ardern on secondment? Is it possible that we can borrow her for 6 months? We'd only need 6 months.
We're quite
get Scotty.
We like her.
We'll swap out Scotty. You have Scotty for 6 months, and we'll have Ardern.
Okay.
We just need someone to sort out this shit, man. You know, I think when you look at leaders, though, speaking of Ardern, I think holding your newborn baby while at a press conference, that's one of the most powerful things I've ever bloody seen, man. Like,
that's a power move.
Yeah, that's how you make history. Is by doing things like that. Going, it's basically a middle finger. Yeah, whatever. You can criticize me all I like. I've got a job to do. Yeah. So I think we could use her help, is what I'm saying.
So are there any like concerns about like Made in the West this year?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. There are certainly concerns for Made in the West. We've talked to all of our stakeholders. We've talked to all of our partners. We've talked to everyone that's involved. Our supporters and stakeholders. And we're all in agreement. We're going to go for it. We are going to put it on because it is in December. It's 4th of December this year. So for the lockdown to get up to that point, we don't find feasible. We don't think that will happen. But if it does happen, or if there's some form of restriction, we've already we have scenarios where we can still put on a show. So we either delay the show, or we do an online version, or both. So last year, what we did as a contingency was to have an online film festival. So Made in the West Film Festival online. So if you were at the festival last year, you would have noticed that there was a few different TV crews there. So we had the TV crew getting the red carpet interviews, but we also had the TV crew that was filming the online festival. And 1 week after the festival, we actually showed the online festival. What I'm saying here is, if that occurred, because if we couldn't have the festival because of a snap lockdown, at least we still had the online festival we could have promoted. So the way that we see it is that we see it as an opportunity. If there's no lockdown during December, the first week of December, that means we get to have the festival and the online festival all in one without a delay. So we anticipate as well, because of the vaccine rollout by December will be higher. So therefore, infections should be lower. So yeah, we're rolling the dice on, and don't get me wrong, it's still a dice roll. It's just, I'm glad, and a big shout out to all of our sponsors, and a big shout out to all of our stakeholders and supporters, because they are supporting us through this hard time. The lights are still on, the bills are still being paid, so that makes us feel good. Like there was a time last year where we had all of our vendors pull out in 1 week, so we lost all of our advertising revenue in 1 week. So that was, we went from zero to having the festival again, plus an extra cinema, plus the online festival. So we're just anticipating and taking the same approach this year. We're doing a stock take of what we've got, not of what we don't have.
Yeah, that's a good way to approach it.
Yeah. So yeah, watch this space, kids. We are definitely on. If it's not on, we are still on. Okay. We've been, I can't talk about it too much now, but some of the contingencies I have out there are actually almost more exciting than the festival itself. So watch this space. I can't talk too much about it. There may be a venue change if things get really hectic. And the venue that we have in line is pretty damn awesome. So that's the only thing I could say at this time. But with all fingers crossed, fingers crossed, we get to do our festival like normal in December, 4th of December this year.
Well, yeah, I hope so. I always like coming to them. So.
Oh man, I like going to the festival as well.
Yeah.
I have a really good time. A really busy day for me, but I do have a turbo time. But with that said, though, with lockdown going, we got inspired a couple of weeks ago, and we are having the Western Sydney Filmmakers Hangout online networking event that is happening on the 4th of August. So if you guys are listening out there at the moment, a big shout out to Maddie C. Vella, Misty McPhail, Jay Knapp, Blemley Mumford, and Natalie Jerez. Man, without that team, we wouldn't be able to get this sort of thing up and running. So big shout out to the SSP and Made in the West team and Western Sydney Filmmakers Hangout team. We've got to get an acronym for that because that's a lot of things to say in one little space. We've all put it together. We've got a couple of really cool guests. We've got some animators. We've got some filmmakers that we're going to interview. And basically, it's like a choose your own adventure networking event. So you show up to the event online on Zoom, and you get to do polling and decide where the night goes as a crowd. It's a really, really fun night, and it's an opportunity for us to talk more about Made in the West, and it's an opportunity to see what other filmmakers are out there doing in isolation. So if you guys are out there listening, check out the online networking event. So we call it ONE, O-N-E. Yeah.
Yeah, I've dropped into many, and they're always a really good time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've never had you as a special guest on ONE before.
No, but I'd love to be.
I'll put you down to be a ONE guest. Yeah, ONE guest is it's kind of a bit of a rite of passage in Western Sydney at the moment. What I found, this is our third one, I think. We do a lot of people going, hey, can we just be a special guest? But we need to, like, we've had some that are really commercial in nature. We want to be your special guest because they want to sell things to our network. We're like, well, that's not what we're not selling anything at this space at the moment, man. We're selling ideas, man. We're talking about ideas. And again, though, but even talking about ideas, we can't go too much into it because you can still go into what would you call it? Copyrighted material or intellectual property. Teaching people how to do something is worth money. So when we do the online networking event, we've got to talk. We talk about it from an access point of view. It's about how you access networks and how you access locations, access skilled groups. So that's what it's really about. It's not a tutorial space where you learn how to filmmake. It's basically where you get to be a filmmaker. And look, most people know what camera they use. Most people know what camera they can afford. I know there's a difference between those two things. So although I've had a lot of time online scrolling for dream objects of my life, and one of them is an Ursa, Blackmagic Ursa I keep looking at online. I only need $15,000, but you know. Yeah, I just don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So I'm just going to run with the rigs I've got. I've got my GH4s and my GH5s. They do the job and make me the money that I need. So I'm not overly greedy. I'm just I see the work drying up a little bit in the next 2 months. All the on location stuff, of course, but there's plenty of digital work out there to do. Any advice to people out there I'd say, man, just keep soldering on, keep going. If you've got the freedom to do so, if you don't go to the freedom to do so, perhaps go and get the freedom to do so. But easier said than done. Don't go to a fucking protest. That's for goddamn sure.
I was just about to say, yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that at all. Well, look, I think we've reached up to about our half hour, Kat. Where can we find you online? Where we can find Kill the Cat, and where can we find these films?
Yeah, so Kill the Cat is our screenwriting and filmmaking podcast. We take our favorite TV shows and movies and we break them down into digestible, like half an hour advice segments. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, basically any major podworking?
Podworking.
There we go.
Yeah, you got to get one of those spinning wheels and work the shape of the podcast out. Podworking.
Podcast network, and it became Podwork.
Podwork.
Which is a good word for something.
I think we can use that somewhere. Let's put that on ice and see what we can do with it.
Yeah. Again, Kill the Cat. If you want to talk to me, I'm on probably Instagram is the best way to get to me. I'm there as Cat Soul Scripts, and also Kill the Cat podcast is on there. I reply to both. We also have Facebook pages if you want to come and like and follow to see when we put out new episodes.
Right, great, fantastic. And guys, be sure to go and check that out. I listen to Cat Soul's podcast often. It's very informative and they really do dissect some really cool content. But guys, you have been watching The Pagey Train. You can find us on Spotify, Apple iTunes. You can find us on iHeartRadio. And of course, you can find us on YouTube. And if you've been watching us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Every subscribe helps. And if you're really, really super interested, and for you 5 people out there that do it, hit the notifications bell. You've been watching The Pagey Train. We'll see you next time. All right, we're out. I almost butchered that ending there. Almost.